What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the 1912 Exiles podcast. This week we will be looking at the two major news stories. We'll be breaking down the last couple of games, which are the Crawley game, the Bury game, and Morecambe on the Saturday just gone. So before I get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It's now available on a new iTunes link, on Buzzsprout, and on the Amber Army YouTube channel. First major bit of news is that we have our FA Cup first round opponents. We're going to be going away to the Met Police. This is a pretty good tie for us, I think. It's obviously got the potential for a giant killing, but I think we'll approach it in a positive manner, and I think it's a good chance for us to get deeper into the competition. I think I read somewhere that the prize money for the first round has gone up, and if we win, it's £36,000 into the club's coffers, and that might just arrive just in time, ready for sort of spending in January. So hopefully get some reinforcements, because as we'll discuss in a little while, I think the small squad is starting to play a bit of a role. So the other major news, and it is quite major, is the re-signing of Joss Labadie. It was one of those that's been circulating for a while. We knew from a couple of lines that I mentioned that I'd seen in the Argus that he had still been training with the club. He'd been doing his rehab with the club. And it's nice that he's repaid that faith. It would have been a shame to see him go to another League Two team after we'd stuck by him for his rehab and given him that support. But I also think this is a beneficial signing for the club as well, because, as I said just now, we've got a small squad, and based on how the other players have been playing, you'd probably say he would fit in terms of standing in the midfield behind Dolan and Backinson. So he's probably playing better than Sheehan. Well, I say playing. His level is probably higher than what we've seen Sheehan achieve this season, and higher than what we've seen from Charlie Cooper. So it's just bringing that level up, and that's, for a start, is quite a strong midfield physically when you've got Backinson and Labadie in there. And then you've got sort of Dolan's passing ability in there as well, which will foil nicely with them. So that's quite a formidable midfield, and I'd say it's probably up there with some of the best midfield combinations that are in League Two at the moment. And it's coming at a good time. There's a lot of players have played a lot of games. From what I've seen of the games in the last couple of weeks, the last three that we're going to talk about today, I think we've maybe started to see Scott Bennett, who's been brilliant this season, maybe have a little dip in form. And I think that could be just because of the amount of games that he's played already. So just 2 months, 2 and a bit months, because we started midway through August, he's already played 15 games for us. And I think he's played the full 90 pretty much every game that he's been available for us. That's a lot of minutes, especially as he's a centre-half, really, and he's been playing in midfield a lot. Just getting that many minutes is going to take its toll over time if he's not able to get the rest. He missed a couple of games, I think, through injury, but just having an extra body will relieve some of that pressure. And I know his injury history isn't good for Labadie, but he will be excellent as a rotation player, I think. He can get the rest that he needs to try, hopefully avoid another injury, and hopefully he'll be able to meet the levels that we saw him achieve in his best parts of last season, notably the FA Cup performances where he really stood out. And because it's only a deal until the end of the season, if he can't reach that level again, or he continues to struggle with injuries, then the club can part ways with him. Or if he comes up to a level where there's teams maybe at a higher level than us looking to bring him in, then it works for the player as well. I'm hoping that it's a pay-as-you-play deal from a financial point of view, because, like I said, his injury history, it kind of protects us then from having to shell out a lot of money for a player who's not playing. And we have seen already, I've heard some rumours that he's not on as much money as we offered him at in the off season, and that again is good for us. We could have offered him a large contract, and he'd be one of the highest paid players in our team, and he wouldn't have missed the first 20 games of the season. Whereas now we haven't been paying him, I guess, or we've been paying him a retainer, and now we've got him on this new deal on less money than we would have had anyway. So it's a saving for the club. And talking of the financing of the deal for Labadie, worth mentioning that it was some of the supporters' trust and some of the board members who funded this signing. It was a match donation, I guess, from the supporters' trust and the board, and that's allowed us to bring Joss Labadie back in, which is excellent. Like I said, I'm really thrilled with this signing, and I'm glad he's not playing against us. So, like I said, we've got a couple of games to break down. The first one, unfortunately, was the 4-1 defeat to Crawley. It's kind of one that I could see coming because away from home, Crawley aren't a bad side, and we were thin on the ground. I think we had two of the youth team and Mike Flynn registered himself on the Friday night before the game and named himself on the bench. We struggled a bit, really. Well, obviously we lost 4-1, but Pipe was kind of sleeping, lost his man for the first goal, and Butler maybe could have done a bit more to stop the cross going in initially. And then the second goal was a soft penalty. Franks kind of pulled the man back, but I think there wasn't enough really to be. I don't think you get that decision given against you at home, put it that way. And I do think, though, that there was an opportunity for either Demetre or Franks to deal with that ball so that it was never in the situation that Franks would have had to pull the player back for there then to be a penalty given. And then from there wasn't really the response that we expected from the side. There was, from the highlights, to be honest, I think we were lucky to be 1-0 down at half time. And then the second and third goals, I think, were just from heads going down. And I think Flinney was rightly upset with the sort of level of performance he got and the response after we went 1-0 down from the players. He even went as far as saying that he would have done a better job. So it's unfortunate, but it's one of those that I could see coming with the injuries, and then Frank's getting sent off, so he was suspended. That again, I think that came from frustration over the performance, that tackle, and probably because Semenyo looked like he was fouled on the edge of the box just before and it wasn't given, so he's probably a little bit frustrated about that. When just nothing's going your way, I can kind of see why players lose their heads, but at the same time, you kind of expect professional players for the majority of the time to be able to keep composed and not let that sort of thing bother them. Jimmy Matt, I think, took his goal quite well. That took him up to 8 for the season. Then he scored his 9th in the following game against Bury. Again, I've kind of backtracked on what I've said about Jimmy Matt through the podcasts over the season, and I definitely think that I've been impressed with his movement for some of his goals. This one with his back to goal, he played really well, typical centre forwards goal. But also his goal against Bury was really good, and his movement was that of a goal scorer. It's not necessarily what you expect, because he's not got a history of being prolific. But if you look at his movement, he actually moves well as a goal scorer, and he gets into those positions, and he's finishing chances for us. He's our top scorer now. So it might be just that, although the stats show that he's not prolific, it could be that he's not been deployed in a role by other teams. They've seen him as a hold-up man, and he maybe has played as the deeper of a two-man attack, and he's not really been able to get in these goal-scoring positions. But it's good to see him producing for us, even if he hasn't produced for other teams in the past. That's by the by, really. I'm really pleased for him that he's hit the ground running and he's really become an important part of the team. The second game we had was the Bury game, which they were in really good form, and again, away from home, off the back of a heavy defeat as well, and then with Franks out, but we had a couple of players returning from injury. I think, again, that was a pretty good point, and like I said, Jamil Matt took his goal really well, really impressed with his performance. And over these two games, these are sort of where I've seen the dip that I saw from Scott Bennett, just a few bad touches, kind of not quite awake. Players are beating him a bit easier than maybe they were at the start of the season, and he wasn't reading the game as well. Although that being said, I do think his best position is in a back three rather than in midfield, where when he's playing with Franks and either O'Brien, he's able to read the game quite well, so he can cover him behind, because Franks is such a good ball winner and Scott Bennett may be a little bit undersized for against some of the strikers in the league. But he can read the game well, and he can drop in behind Franks, who then goes up to win the ball. Kind of works quite nicely in a trio with Franks, Demetriou, or O'Brien. I think that's his best position, and then putting him in midfield maybe asks a bit too much of his on the ball ability. But again, a good point, I think, against Bury away, a long away trip for the lads as well. And again, I've been impressed with Semenyo as well the last couple of games. I think he's making it difficult for Harris to force his way back into the squad, into the starting 11 at least. And it's good to have that competition, really, especially with those two young players up top, that they're going to hopefully drive themselves to be better, and that'll only benefit us and their parent clubs long term. I'd be happy to see Harris and Semenyo and Backinson stay with us until the end of the season. Haven't really seen much of Cameron Pring yet, but what's important is that he provides that cover for if Dan Butler ever goes down injured or needs a rest. We've got a ready-made left back without having to shift Demetriou out there, whose best position is probably at centre back. And finally, we come on to the Morecambe game from Saturday just gone. Flying start pretty much from the kickoff. I think it was officially timed at 23 seconds for our first goal from Amund. I think it was another one of those games where we've said before that we need to put teams away certainly when we get a lead. And this is why that we were kind of punished. The game was pretty even, I'd say, between the two teams, but we were given a 1-goal head start by them, really. And because we failed to capitalise on that lead, extend it to 2, then one missed interception towards the end of the game from Forbes, I believe, who in the last episode we sort of discussed some of the criticisms of him in terms of his defending. Unfortunately, he's missed an interception, and it's allowed Kevin Ellison to slot the equaliser under Joe Day. Although, to be fair, a point against Morecambe, who are kind of our bogey team. They have been since the infamous Tom Naylor games, to be honest. A point against them, who we've struggled to beat in the past, is probably a pretty decent result. So finally, we have the Player of the Month vote for October. I'll put a link to the straw poll in the description. So your nominees for this month are Padraig Amund, who scored 2 goals and got an assist. And his effort, I think, all around the pitch, even if he doesn't get a goal or assist, is worthy of note. Next, we have Dan Butler, who just has continued to impress. Like I said last time out, he was named in the League 2 Team of the Season so far. If there is such a thing, League 2 announced it on Twitter. So it's just testament to how well Dan's been playing, just carrying on his form from last season, really. Joe Day is the third nominee. He hasn't kept any clean sheets this month. We've conceded quite a few goals, but he seems to just make game-changing saves to rescue us a point or even 3 points in some cases. Week after week, he's always pulling off important saves. His skills are as a shot stopper, so we kind of take it for granted that that's what he provides, but he has had a good month. And the final nominee is Jamil Matt, who has just continued to pick up goals here and there. He scored 3 again this month. He's leading our goal scoring charts with 9. So those are your nominees. I'll announce the winner on the next podcast. And again, I'll put a link in the description to the straw poll for you to vote for your man of the match. Player of the month even, not man of the match. So finally, a bit of news that I did miss earlier was the appointment of a commercial director, which me and Taff talked about last time out. We've got Alex Eagle, who comes with a very good reputation and a very good CV after working at the FAW for the last few years. So I think that'll be an important appointment, and it definitely something that the club is probably going to benefit from in terms of trying to progress the club into where we want to be, which is a sustainable club. We want to grow the club, and ultimately we want to try and move up the league structure. So thanks for joining me this week. That's all from me. Once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It's available on iTunes. Buzzsprout is the new hosting service, and also it is now going up on the Amber Army YouTube channel. So plenty of formats for you to consume the podcast on now. Thanks very much for listening. Up the county.